Shalom Israel. I am Yahusha ben Moshe Gilyahna of YHRIM Ministries. Our main website is YHRIM.com. The link to it and all of our ministry outreaches is down below in the video description. It's been a long while since I've made any videos. In fact, it's been nearly a year since the last video I put out, which I titled Winter is Coming. Which means it's been over a year since I've been wanting to get this video made. There was originally a lot of other things that I wanted to cover in this video, but instead I'm going to try and focus on a few important points. The main point of which is concerning another video that I made about 8 years ago, which I titled The 70 Weeks of Daniel. Specifically the part in that video where I spoke about when I believed the 1290 days would begin. The reason I'm making this video is because I was wrong about when the 1290 days of Daniel would start, which is why I took that video down back some time ago, for all of you that was asking. The reason I was wrong was because of how I viewed some of the verses which spoke about the events listed in those chapters of Daniel, as well as what is in Revelation and other books which relate to the same time period. It made me think that all of the events listed had to be fully complete before the 6,000th year. Combine that with what is written in Mattityahu 24, verse 22, where the Mashiach states that those days shall be shortened, and I believe that that was just reinforcing the same point. But we'll come back to what that verse is actually speaking about later on. First, though, I want to touch on the 6,000 years. In the beginning, in Bereshith, or Genesis, chapter 1, man was given 6 days, or 6,000 years, to rule the earth. A verse that goes with that is Kepha Bet, or 2 Peter, chapter 3, verse 8. Now, of course, after this 6,000 years is up, we know that there is a 7th 1,000-year millennial kingdom. And again, I believed that all the verses which related to the 1290 days written in Daniel had to be completed before the 6,000th year began, which now, of course, is just a couple weeks away. However, back last year, which was actually 2016 on the pagan calendar, Yahushua began to show my Abba, Moshe Gilyahna, some further understandings on several points. One verse in particular which him and I have discussed is Gilyahna, or Revelation, chapter 13, and we'll start at verse 4. And they worshipped the dragon who gave power to the beast, and they worshipped the beast, saying, Who is like the beast? Who is able to make war with him? And there was given to him a mouth speaking great things and blasphemies, and power was given to him to continue 42 months. Now, as we have read, the beast was already in power and was ruling the earth in these verses, which all of us are bearing witness of in these last days. The point that my Abba brought up is, if the beast was already ruling, then why did the beast have to be given power to continue 42 months? Now, I want to stop here for just a moment, because I want to touch on something that is a very basic premise, as it's all through the scriptures, but we've had multiple people asking questions along the lines of, who is the beast? What are you calling the beast? Why do you call it a beast system? And other similar questions along that line. My Abba, Moshe Gilyahna, is the one that actually teaches on this. He speaks about it in many of the different teachings that he has written. He's also spoken about it in some of the video teachings as well. There is one teaching in particular, the written document that's on our website, he titled, Kingdoms of Men Are Beast Kingdoms. Again, I'll put the link to it down below in the video description if you want to look that up. It's also on our main website, which I mentioned earlier. In any case, I'm just going to try to hit a couple basic points here. In the scriptures, there are 2 beasts, as is spoken about in Gilyahna, or Revelation, chapter 13. One beast is made up of all the governments in all the nations, as well as the so-called elite who are in the shadows behind the scenes who are actually running the nations, as well as the commercial beast system, as in all the corporations, the stock markets, etc., which all of those are nothing but money changers. All these entities are part of and support the governmental beast system. The seat of the beast, as is mentioned in Gilyahna, Revelation chapter 16, verse 10, is the UN headquarters in New York, which is where the literal seats for all the government representatives of all nations sat, making up this one world government. The UN, or United Nations, is the same thing that Nimrod was trying to do, as in bringing the power and control of all the nations underneath one central force. And this is why the beast system worships Nimrod, who they call the sun god, by many different false deity names. It's just like the pagan holiday that's coming up here. Everybody calls it Easter, and they claim that it's Christian and all this stuff. This is all pagan worship. Easter goes back to Ishtar. Ishtar is another name for Semiramis, which is Nimrod's wife. If you start studying these pagan holidays, almost all the holidays are centralized around Nimrod or his family members. And the reason that all the pagan days and all the false deities and all the different cultures and everything else all go back to Nimrod is because at the Tower of Babel, all the people that was there worshiped Nimrod as the sun god and his family, etc. And when Yahuwah confounded the languages there, and these people divided up and they left, because Yahuwah had changed their language, they had to create new names for the same false religion that they brought with them. So this is why, no matter if you're looking at Greek, Roman, Babylonian, Egyptian, they all have different names, but they're all the same pagan deities that you see in every one of these cultures. And you see that all through history. And this is why that the elite that is here today still worship the same false deities. Now, because the U.S. is the head instigator in this UN's one world government, and because it holds the seat of the beast, or the UN headquarters up in New York, these are a couple of the reasons why that the U.S. will be destroyed early on in the soon-coming events. But after the U.S. is destroyed, the rest of the Western nations will quickly follow, as well as all the rest of the nations that's left. Now, the second beast. The second beast is the religious beast system, of which the Pope, the Vatican, and the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, which if you don't know, that's made up of 57 Islamic nations, who are also all part of the 193 nations that make up the UN. These are the main three entities that control the religious beast. However, you must understand that all false religions, no matter what denomination or division they are, they all make up the religious beast system, including the false church system, as well as Islam, which those two alone cover nearly half of the Earth's current population, or so they claim. And regardless, we know that it is very widespread. Now, moving on, how do these beasts get their power? They get it from Satan. Satan is allowed to give the kingdoms of this earth, and therefore the power of those kingdoms, to whoever he wishes, which he gives it to those who worship him and will further his agenda, which his agenda from the start has been to steal, kill, and destroy. Satan took control of the kingdoms of the earth when Kabah, or Eve, ate of Satan's lie and believed Satan over Yahuwah. When that took place, the kingdoms of the earth was transferred from man to Satan. And from that time, Satan has given the kingdoms of this earth to his servants that make up this beast system. Men, again, like Nimrod, who is also known as Baal, Moloch, Saturn, and many other false deity names, who established a powerful kingdom and mental war, all built up around false sun worship, which is actually the worship of Satan. Satan even offered all the kingdoms of the earth to the Mashiach, if he would fall down and bare his head to him, in Mattityahu, or Matthew, chapter 4, verse 9. Now that specific reference is actually from the Hebrew Shem Tov scroll of Mattityahu, which, for those of you who don't know, the Shem Tov scroll of Mattityahu is an original Hebrew text of Mattityahu that was found before that it was later translated into the Greek, which a lot of people claim that the Brighteon, or what most people call the New Testament, was originally written in Greek. No, these were Israelites. They spoke Hebrew. They wrote it in Hebrew. It was later translated into Greek because of the regions that they were going into and the people they were speaking with, which all the original scrolls we know is all in the Vatican Library because they don't want people to have knowledge. But getting back to Mattityahu 4:9, where Satan was offering Mashiach all the kingdoms of the earth, we read the same account in Luke 4, starting at verse 5, and Satan, taking him up into a high mountain, showed him all the kingdoms of the earth in a moment of time. And Satan said to him, All this power will I give you, and the glory of them, for that is delivered to me, and to whomever I will I give it. So if Satan, and thereby this beast system, have the power and control over all the kingdoms of the earth for the 6,000 years of man's rule, and they do, as anyone with their eyes open today can see, then why did the beast have to be given power to be allowed to continue 42 months? Coming back to where we started earlier. Is it because at the point in time that this verse is fulfilled, the 6,000 years is either nearly ended or has already ended? If so, then does the 42 months begin after the 6,000 years is over, or does only a portion of this 42 months overlap past the end of the 6,000 years? I do have my own opinions on this, but as of this time, I'm not going to state what they are. I will say, though, that I do wholly believe that this is currently the 13th month of the year 5999 since the creation of Adam, or Adam, which this being 5999 SC, it is also the 7th sabbatical year in this cycle, and that at this coming Abib, which is just a few weeks away, will begin the 120th Yobel, or Jubilee year, since the creation of Adam. Going back to Bereshith, or Genesis, chapter 6, verse 3. The teaching which the year comes from is one that I spent countless hours over the course of several years studying out. I first completed it back in 2010, and I later titled it The Restoration of the Scriptural Year. It literally covers hundreds of scriptures throughout the Word, following the direct lineage of a multitude of people that's in the Word, the reigns of the kings of both houses of Israel, which is very complicated and took a lot of time, as well as many other details and other verses that's listed throughout the scriptures. It's also a completely separate teaching from the 1290 days of Daniel, although they do interrelate. Again, I do believe that the restoration of the scriptural year is fully correct. I have had a few people who have wanted me to put the full restoration of the scriptural year teaching out on video, and I have considered it a few different times. But one thing is the amount of time that it takes to teach, which even in person is a very long teaching, and on video it would take even longer. I can't even guess how many videos it would take to do, which in itself takes a lot of time and work. And just to be honest, I would say that very few people would actually take the time to watch it. But more importantly, there are other teachings which I believe are far more pressing, and most likely it won't be long before our YouTube channel is banned or deleted by the government censors, as well as our Facebook page and our website even for that matter. But our websites and other pages will be up for as long as it's Yahuwah's will. However, we also know and have been warned that the time is coming when that people will search for the truth and won't be able to find it, as is in Amos or Amos, chapter 8, verses 11 and 12. Also, anyone who has their eyes open and has studied the Word can look around today at the vast multitude of events taking place in all the nations of the earth, which are signs written in the Word in places like Mattityahu chapter 24, as well as many other places. And you can know without a doubt that we are right at the end of this age. We know and can see that the Mashiach's return is near. We also know that before his return, this beast system is going to be allowed to slaughter vast multitudes of people. And that time is now. The mass slaughter has already begun in some nations, and it's knocking on the door here in the U.S. and the rest of the Western nations, and after that, all the nations that remain. I want to stop again for just a moment because I want to show you a website called theeagle.com. Most people have probably never heard of this site. It was in the alternative news back a few months ago for a short while, but then everybody quit talking about it. This website is all about government purchases. Mostly they're focused on military budgets as they forecast how much money the military will spend on equipment every year. And when I say the military, I mean the military of every nation. They project and follow the budgets, GDPs, and everything else of all these countries and try to approximate and estimate, projecting out what they're going to be spending in the future. You can see their homepage here. They just talk about different things. Here they've got where Croatia is buying F-16 fighter jets from Israel. Russia successfully conducts second test launch of Sarmat ICBM. Intercontinental ballistic missile, that's their new nuclear missile, which the UN dubs the Satan II, which no other nation is able to intercept, including the U.S., which the U.S. missile defense system is a joke in the first place. It's so antiquated. Anyhow, it talks about Republic of Korea, first F-35 stealth aircraft, etc., and so on. If you want to go to it and actually read up on some of the things, theeagle.com is the website, the address to go to. But I'm going to drop down to here. It's where you click on countries. When you click on that, it'll bring up this page. Now, this is a list, and you can go as many pages as you want to go. The first page only goes down to the top 30 nations, is what it's showing here. It has the United States at the top because of its GDP and its military expenses, which the GDP is in the trillions and the military expenses is billions. That'd be 612 billion there. We see the United States, China, Japan, Germany, United Kingdom, etc., and so on. You can go down through here all the different nations that they list. Now this page is just a general listing with some of the general information about each of the nations. However, you can actually click on a specific nation and bring up more details. Before I go to the United States, I actually want to go to China first and show it as an example. Here's the page on China, and as you can see down through the details, they have a lot of different listings, a lot of different budgets and everything else. Right here's the currency, which is the Chinese yuan, which, by the way, they just backed with gold just the other day, which we've been talking about was coming for years. Anyhow, here is their population. Now, this top section is the current, and then down here you see a forecast, but the current, they're showing 1.4 billion people. Here they show the density, which is 143 inhabitants per square kilometer, or in other words, there's 143 people on average living per square kilometer. The gross domestic product is 11 trillion. Military budget, 148 billion. Okay? These are the current figures, which actually, as it shows here, was from 2016. Now, they're forecasting in 2025, okay? So they're forecasting ahead of time that by 2025, they still expect China to be 1.4 billion people. They expected the density to be 142 inhabitants per square kilometer, so just a hair down from what it was. But they expect the gross domestic product to jump $4 trillion. Okay, they're showing 15 trillion. And the military budget is going to jump to 270 billion. So that's a huge increase over what it is at the moment. And this forecast, again, is only for 2025. That's only 7 years from right now. So now that you kind of see how the details are laid out, and every country, you can click on every single country on that list, and it'll bring up the details for it. But this just gives you an idea of how everything is laid out and how the forecast works and what have you. So since we've looked at China for an example, let's go to the United States. Now here they show the U.S. The currency is the U.S. dollar, fiat paper, going to be worthless soon. This again, the current figures they're showing here was for actually 2016. Population 324 million, which we know that's a lie. Probably closer to about 450 million, but irregardless. They're showing the official population number, 324 million. Gross domestic product they're showing is 19 trillion. And the military budget they show is 612 billion, which is how the U.S. can have some form of military operations going on in 177 nations, possibly more, out of the whole 193 nations that's on the face of the earth. And yet all these other countries are the so-called provocateurs and instigators. The U.S. military don't have any business being in any other country besides the United States, as far as that goes. Any case, let's go on. I'm going to drop down here to the forecast. Again, this is forecasted for 2025. The population, they're showing 54 million. Now, that's not a drop of 54 million. They are expecting 7 years from right now, they are forecasting that the population of the United States will drop down from the official number of 324 million. They expect it to drop down to only 54 million people left. And we can see that reflected in the density. The density up here for the 2016 numbers was 34 inhabitants per square kilometer. Now, in this forecast, they're showing the density as 6 inhabitants per square kilometer. The same thing's reflected in the GDP, the gross domestic product. It goes from 19 trillion down to 921 billion is what they are forecasting. The military budget drops from 612 billion down to 8 billion. Okay? Now think about that for a few minutes. This is a website that is all about projecting and forecasting what the military budgets is going to be of the nations, because they're using these projections to know what is the best investments, what companies are going to be the ones to get the contracts, and etc. That's what this website is focused on. And yet, they're showing that the United States, in all respective purposes, just looking at some figures, the United States is destroyed. Just the population alone, going from 324 million down to 54 million, that's a reduction of more than 80% of the people that's in the United States. We've been warning for many years about the things that was coming, and we've been warning about the slaughter that's going to happen. And it's not just the U.S. This is just one example. And this side is just come right out and publicly showing what this beast system has planned. As we've stated all along, things are not going to get better. No man in this beast system is going to save this or any other nation. They are all working for the beast system, as they are all servants of Satan. Satan, working through this beast system, has only one agenda: to kill out most of Earth's population. And first and foremost on their list is anyone who is trying to serve Yahuwah. And this beast system will succeed to a large degree, as is written in several places in the Word. Let's go to Gilyahna, or Revelation, chapter 6. We'll start at verse 9. And when he had opened the fifth seal, I saw under the altar the beings of those that were slain for the word of Yahuwah and for the testimony which they held. And they cried with a loud voice, saying, How long, O Yahuwah, Kadosh and Emet, do you not judge and avenge our blood on them that dwell on the earth? And white robes were given to each of them, and it was said to them that they should rest yet for a little while, until their fellow servants and their Israelite brothers should also be killed as they was completed. We also see this in Gilyahna, or Revelation, chapter 12, verse 17. And the dragon was angry with the woman, and went to make war with the remnant of her seed, that shomer, which means to keep, observe, or guard, the commandments of Yahuwah, and have the testimony of Yahushua HaMashiach. If you pay close attention to this verse, you will see that there are two specific and separate groups of people spoken about here. You have the woman, and then you have her seed. There's a lot in this verse. First, this verse is not talking about the false church religious systems. Although, as a side note, most of them will also be slaughtered as well because they are following the orders of the government clergy, who are the false preachers, and have been taught to submit to this beast system government. Which, speaking of that, I saw an article a few weeks ago, and I wish I would have saved it, but it was talking about these false preachers who are the government clergy, or the Judas goats, as my Abba taught about in his last video that he made a few weeks ago, how they have gotten the people to declare, state, and actually sign papers that they will submit and be obedient to the government. That is the state of mind that this generation's in right now. Anyway, back to these verses here. All the people that it is speaking about here is directly concerning those who are trying to serve Yahuwah, those who are keeping his commandments and have the testimony of Yahushua HaMashiach. This begs the question, if all of these people in both of these groups are trying to serve Yahuwah, then what is the difference between the woman who is protected and the ones that it calls her seed, who Yahuwah allows to be slaughtered by the dragon, Satan, using his flood of armies of this beast system? Does Yahuwah answer the prayers of the one group and the other groups disignored? Would Yahuwah simply choose to protect one group over here, but then allow another group over here to be slaughtered? Does everybody need to get in line and pick a number to find out which group you're in? No. Of course, it's none of these things. Instead, it is a choice, and our actions is what determines which group we will be a part of. Still in Gilyahna, or Revelation, chapter 12, we're going to back up to verse 13. I will be stopping a couple of times in these verses, just to explain a few points here and there. And when the dragon saw that he was cast to the Olam, he persecuted the woman, who is Yisrael, or Yisrael, who brought forth the male child. Now we know the male child is speaking about the Mashiach, who was born through Mary, who was a descendant of Daud, or David, as was foretold in the scriptures. I will touch on one quick point right here, because a lot of people need to understand this. Although the Mashiach was born through the lineage of Daud, he was not of this or any man's bloodline. Man is from the ground. The ground is still cursed. Mashiach was only and fully from Yahuwah, and he existed before man was ever created. But that's a whole nother teaching. I'm not going to go into that anymore. I just wanted to touch on that point. There's a lot of people that need to understand that. Now let's continue on to verse 14. And to the woman was given 2 wings of a great eagle, that she might fly into the wilderness, into her place where she is nourished for a time, and times, and half a time, from the face of the serpent. And the serpent cast out of his mouth Mayim, or water, as a flood, after the woman, that he might cause her to be carried away by the flood. Now there's a couple points right here. Where the serpent cast out of his mouth Mayim as a flood, this is actually speaking of a flood of armies. Okay? Just keep that in mind for a moment. He sent that out after the woman, that he might cause her to be carried away by the flood. What happened in Noah's day when the flood came? All those who were outside the ark were carried away by the flood. In other words, they died. Satan is trying to counterfeit what Yahuwah did in the days of Noah, except instead of water, he's trying to use a flood of armies, which is one of the reasons he has been uniting all of the beast kingdoms. Now let's continue on to verse 16. And the ground helped the woman, and the ground opened her mouth and swallowed up the flood, which the dragon cast out of his mouth. Now, the ground opening its mouth and swallowing up the flood, this means that Yahuwah destroys these armies, by whatever means he chooses, who come against the woman who is the remnant that fled into the wilderness. Then these dead armies are then buried in the earth. Okay? Now let's go back once again to verse 17. And the dragon was angry with the woman, and went to make war with the remnant of her seed, the Shomer, which again is keep, observe, or guard the commandments of Yahuwah, and have the testimony of Yahushua HaMashiach. The dragon was angry because he was not able to kill the woman who was in the wilderness. So he went to make war with the remnant of her seed. Now, who is her seed? Again, we have two distinct and separate groups listed here, who both keep the commandments of Yahuwah and have the testimony of Mashiach, the woman who is protected, and the ones it calls her seed, who are allowed to be slaughtered. But there is one thing that separates the group referred to as her seed from the group that makes up the woman. The one that the word calls her seed did not flee into the wilderness. That is why, after Satan was not able to get to the woman, he turned and went after her seed, who were still in the cities under control of this beast system. Yahuwah can't get any clearer than that. He warns his people in his word over and over again. All the signs that is written that will take place in the last days are all happening right now. Yahuwah warns his people to flee away from the cities and into the wilderness. Those who don't heed these warnings, written in his word, even though they are serving Yahuwah, they will be slaughtered by this beast system. Now with that said, as long as they do not deny Yahushua HaMashiach, as long as they do not take the mark of the beast, and as long as they remain faithful even unto death, these people will still have a chance of making it come Judgment Day. But they will be slaughtered during the Great Tribulation. We've seen and heard many people who say, I'm waiting on Yahuwah to tell me to go, or something similar along that line. Or they are waiting on the temple to be rebuilt, a 7-year peace treaty to be signed, etc., etc. It's the signs that came from the church system, which are not in the Word in the way that they try to teach them. As we have said many times, the signs of the last days, Yahuwah wrote in his Word as warnings to his people. Yahuwah's already warned his people to flee into the wilderness in his Word. He's not going to make us get prepared, nor is he going to go around to every individual and tap him on the shoulder and tell him to move along. This is why he put the signs that would happen in the last days in his Word. This is why he warned his people to flee into the wilderness before the flood comes, before the slaughter begins, in his Word. He's already warned his people and told them what to do, but it's their choice if they will heed the warnings or not. This is why he put the signs that would happen in the last days in his Word. So his people, when they saw them, they would know what time it is, they would know what was coming. This is why he warned his people to flee into the wilderness before the flood comes, before the slaughter begins. He has already warned his people and told them what to do, but it's their choice if they want to heed his warnings or not. As we just read here in Gilyahna chapter 12, The woman was already in the wilderness before Satan, the dragon, sent out the flood. Those who wait until after the flood is sent out to try to flee won't make it. People who's trying to wait until the last minute, or who's trying to wait until they see things coming down to be able to flee, it's the same mentality we've all witnessed when some impending disaster, whether it be the wildfires, the hurricanes, whatever it may be, when they know that they're coming and the people know they're going to get hit, yet most people wait until after it has happened, after the power is out, after there's no running water, etc. Then, after it's already happened, they all try to run out at once to the stores and fight over bottled water at $80 a case and try to scrape together whatever other supplies that they can find. Most people watching it on TV or on YouTube or whatever sit there and say, well, they knew it was coming, why didn't they leave? Or, well, if they knew it was coming and what was going to happen, why didn't they get prepared before it happened? Most Israelites in their heart knows the day and hour that we are living in. They know what is coming as Yahuwah spoke it in his word. Yet, how many of them are preparing? How many of you that's watching this right now are working to get out of the cities and flee into the wilderness and get prepared before the flood comes? I'll tell you right now, as we've said many times, it's not something you are going to do overnight. If you haven't started yet, you better be putting it into high gear and get moving very quickly. I've also equally heard and seen many people say that they don't want to live through tribulation, that they'll just die and not worry about it, or similar things. Are you so sure? Do you really believe it'll be that easy? It's easy to say things with our mouth, but living it is a whole other reality. When your children are hungry and crying because you don't have any food to eat, water to drink, shelter to stay warm and dry, clothes, blankets, etc., because you haven't taken the mark of the beast, will you remain faithful? When they come and take you and your family to a FEMA camp, and you see them torturing and beheading people who arrived there before you, or when you watch them torturing and beheading your grandparents, your father, mother, sisters, brothers, friends, etc., will you remain faithful? How about when your number comes up, and they take your children in front of you and are torturing them in ways that we as Israel can't imagine, and they're screaming to you for help, and you are forced to sit there and watch your children dying horrendous deaths one by one, and all you have to do is to take the mark of the beast, or deny Yahushua HaMashiach, or whatever else they want you to do in order to stop your children's suffering. Will you remain faithful? Is this what you want to sit and watch your family go through? Just because you would rather stay in or near the conveniences of the cities right now? Or because you don't want to be called a crazy conspiracy theorist or be looked down upon by your family or your friends? Or is it simply because you don't want to be bothered to do the work and the sacrifice necessary in order to flee away from the cities and prepare for what is now right at the door? You want your family and your children to go through that? This is what you would prefer just so you don't have to do anything now? I ask these questions because the choices that you are making right now, either by your inaction and doing nothing, or by taking action and doing whatever is necessary in order to get out and get prepared, is what is going to decide if you are a part of the woman who is protected in the wilderness, or are a part of those who are led to the slaughter. It's very easy to say that you would never deny the Mashiach or cast away your faith right now, but when these things are happening in front of your eyes, it would be worse than you or I could ever even imagine. and it's right at the door. What they are doing right now is setting the final stage before this nation, the United States, is destroyed. Yet there's still people running around pushing Trump as some kind of savior, even though every single thing he has done is no different than Obama and any other predecessor, which is what we stated would happen before this last election ever took place. All the presidents, except one or two who stepped out of line like JFK, all they've done is nothing but to further the elite's agenda, to further Satan's agenda, including bringing about the final planned destruction of the U.S. economy, which is what all these tariffs and this trade war that is now commencing is a small part of. China backing their yuan currency with gold, which we have warned about was going to happen for years now, is another large part of the elite's agenda, as this is shifting all the nations away from the dollar and other currencies toward China and Russia. They're going to do the exact same thing, as well as the rest of the BRICS nations. Pushing gun control to disarm the people so they are helpless. You have all these politicians, Hollywood, and all the others up on stage spewing forth their propaganda on how the people should be disarmed, all the while they're surrounded by armed guards. Because the laws they make are not for themselves. The laws are for the slaves that they intend to wipe out. Also, using this generation of rebellious children across the nation, who have been brainwashed by all the disinformation they have been taught in this beast system's propaganda centers, also called schools. You tell a bunch of brainwashed children they can get out of class if they go out there and hold signs, what do you think they're going to do? The few of them that's been taught any better and know anything about history been silenced. The media wouldn't even let them speak unless they agreed to only read one of the pre-written questions or statements which they would be given. What little was heard from them on the mainstream news was heavily edited. They tried to make it seem like they couldn't support their own views or that they couldn't counter the stupidity of disarming the people. These children going around protesting for their own rights and their parents' rights to be taken away by this beast system, they're out there protesting, asking the government to make them defenseless. All the while, they're stating that only the government and the police should have guns. What do you think happened in Nazi Germany? First, they silenced all opposing voices. Then they got rid of any truth so that the only thing that was left was the propaganda line. Next, they disarmed the people to make them defenseless. Then only the government had guns. And the people were totally reliant upon the government for everything. There was a few people who could see what was coming, and they got out of Nazi Germany while they were still able. The rest said, "Oh, that'll never happen here," or those who kept waiting, saying, "I'll leave before it gets too bad." And then they or their families ended up either being slaughtered in the streets or in the concentration camps. As we have warned many times, Nazi Germany was a test run. It was practice. All the things that they were doing in Germany, and worse, is either already being done here in the U.S. or is preparing to be implemented. That's why nearly all of the upper Nazi military, the scientists, and those over the concentration camps were brought to the U.S. when Germany collapsed, which was also planned. Hitler most likely went to Argentina, and some of his children run Germany now, and probably several other nations for that matter. But this is what these children are actually protesting that they want to happen again. The hired actors and agents that are leading this even created armbands and gave the Nazi salute at a speech. You can't get much more blatant than that. The so-called parents of all these children are just as brainwashed. This is why they have taught and allowed this beast system to teach their children all these things in the first place. let alone allowing their children to take part in this garbage. And as my Abba stated before, this is part of what Yahushua HaMashiach stated in Mattityahu 10:21. And the brother shall deliver up the brother to death, and the Abba the child, and the children shall rise up against their parents and cause them to be put to death. This is repeated again in Yochanan Moshe, or Mark, chapter 13, verse 12. What is happening right now is in part what will lead to the fulfillment of those verses. Even China is now raising its voice and pushing for the people in the U.S. to be disarmed. Why should they even care? Because, as my Abba began to warn people about 40 years ago, the Chinese military is one of the major groups that will be used here in the U.S. against the people, and they want to limit their losses as much as possible. This beast system will make vast achievements into their plans for their new world order. They will kill billions of people. But at some point, Yahuwah will put a stop to them, as he is going to cut their days short. As I stated earlier, that we'd come back to Mattityahu, or Matthew, chapter 24, verse 22. And except those days are shortened, there should no flesh survive. But for the elect, and for the sake of those chosen, those days shall be shortened. What days are shortened? This is another verse that Yahuwah gave my Abba a better understanding of. Yahuwah is not going to shorten the 6 days or 6,000 years of man's rule, like I used to think back 8 years ago. But rather, Yahuwah is speaking about the plans of this beast system. They plan things out 50 to 100 years ahead of time, maybe even longer. Just like all 3 world wars was all planned and written about what each one will be over before they even started the first one. If this beast system was allowed to progress with their plans unimpeded, then they would end up wiping out all flesh. Just as it states here, no flesh would survive. Instead, Yahuwah is going to allow them to go for a time. But then Mashiach is going to return and is going to cut their days short. And the governmental beast system and the false religious system will be cast into hell alive, as is written in Gilyahna, Revelation, chapter 19, verse 20. My Abba's Abba, my grandfather, my Abba and myself have all tried to warn people for many years about what was coming, which is so much more than what little bit I've touched here in this video. The point being, irregardless of when the 1290 days of Daniel begins, or begun, the things that were warned about what was coming is now here. It is now literally knocking at the door, and the mass slaughter will soon commence, and billions of people will die. In some nations, their time's already up. They're already facing starvation and already being slaughtered by this beast system. If you're in a nation where you can still get away from the cities and flee to the wilderness and get prepared for what is at the door, then today is the time to take action, and speed is of the essence. I leave you with Mattityahu 24, verse 21. For then shall be great tribulation, such as was not since the beginning of this age to this time. No, nor ever shall be. I urge you to take all of these words to heart. Share this and all of our videos with all of those who you care for and anyone else you are able. My name is Yahushua ben Moshe from YHRIM Ministries. I bid you shalom, peace, even though there is no peace in the earth in these last days.